So here we are in 2023. Can't believe 2023 already. So my great friend Paul and myself have been doing a series of talks on largely sort of what it is to be human, and in the broadest sense of the word. And today thought we would talk about the practicalities of the Bible in terms of trying to resolve practically, not in some airy-fairy sort of spiritual sense per se, although there's nothing airy-fairy about anything spiritual. But what practically can we learn from the Bible in terms of the context and the business context to resolve some of the challenges that we're currently facing? So I thought that let's use that as the title for today. And over to you, Paul. What are your thoughts on the practical aspects?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Listen, it's a great subject. It's something that I about a week ago, someone I know had around this post, and it was like, and you will have seen, facsimiles of this post like hundreds, maybe even thousands of times. It's like, what are the best books that you read in business? All this stuff, and no one ever puts the Bible.
Yeah.
So anyway, but it's true. It's true, and I mean. Right. The one guy that agreed with me said it was so encouraging. It was this young guy. He's actually had quite a lot of success as an influencer. And I was like, good for you, mate. I go, that is going to give you a solid and sustainable competitive advantage over the pagans, which will only grow over time.
Yeah.
I mean, Proverbs 1:7 says, fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom.
Yeah. Also
in Proverbs, it says people are either wise, evil, or foolish. Wise, foolish, or evil. I'm sorry, if you don't read the Bible, you're not wise. You can be smart, you can be knowledgeable, you can be Grant Cardone, you can be making a ton of cash, but you're not wise, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard truth to swallow, but it's true. So reading reading the Bible just doesn't necessarily make you wise. The trick is, I believe, what I do is, I've heard Mark Driscoll say this. I've actually heard someone else say this. There was a piece of research that said reading the Bible is great, but it only really sort of like starts working once you do it more than 4 times a week. So once you're actually when you're more likely to be reading the Bible than not on a weekly basis, that's where things come on. One of the things that I say to people I'm working with is like, if you want to be successful, you need to think like God. And thinking like God actually isn't that difficult. Like he tells us in no uncertain terms exactly what he thinks, and he repeats himself a lot, right? And these are the principles that God has used to stitch this universe together. Yeah. So if these are the principles, the truths that hold this universe together, you don't think it's going to be useful for your life, for your business, for your marriage, for your relations with everyone you love, everyone you want to do business with. So how does that work out practically? Last Wednesday, my pastor, God Sicario, Pastor Renato, was having a good rail about, he said, you need to read your Bible. You need to read your Bible every day. He said, he didn't actually say stop watching it on YouTube, because that's something that I do a lot. I really felt that he was talking to me. It's like, there's nothing wrong with listening to people preaching or listening to Bible studies on YouTube, but it's kind of like, it's like watching MMA and boxing as opposed to actually going down the gym and putting on the gloves yourself.
Yeah.
So the thing is, in this age, it's never been easier to do. Last year, I did I did a Bible in a year. This year, I'm actually just focusing on the Old Testament. It really helps if you're doing it in fellowship. And what it does is it feeds you. I mean, it feeds you. It's like that line in the Lord's Prayer, give us today our daily bread.
Yeah.
It's spiritual food. It's if you like, if I had to give it a soundbite, it's food for intuition.
Yeah.
It's food for wisdom. I mean, I moved into a new apartment on Wednesday, and at first I wasn't keen on it, and then I sort of like looked about it. I go, actually, this apartment's a lot nicer than I'm giving it credit for. I played a bit with the lights, and it's got two really nice bathrooms. And I am a real tart, okay? I'm such a woman when it comes down to it. But I was like, you know what? This bathroom, what I could do is I could convert this into a war room. Have you seen that movie, War Room?
Yeah. I love war rooms.
Yeah,
yes.
right. So I've got in there, and what I've done is the first thing I did is I put up all the aspects in my life, and I think I came to about 8 that I need help with. Okay, so it was like peace, it was like purity, it was like power, it was like insight, it was like impact, there was income. So I put down all these things that I needed help with. Then I put down my prayer people, all the people that I needed to pray for. And then what I'm going to be doing is, I read the Bible today, and the thing is, it doesn't actually take that long. And I was actually in Matthew, the Matthew effect. To those that have, more will be given. To those that don't have, even that shall be taken from them. I mean, that is a natural law.
Yeah.
Right? This is how the universe works. This is like why Jordan Peterson has made a fortune going on stage, reading the Bible and having a public aneurysm.
Yeah.
It's like these are the tenets that govern reality.
Yeah.
And so when I've got so what I do is I haven't done it yet. I was just about to write it. I'm going to write that down somewhere, and I'm going to stick it probably next, somewhere close to one of those 8 things that I need help with.
Yeah.
But what that is, I mean, it's kind of like overkill because I live by myself. So technically I don't need a separate room to go and do this. Like I could do it anywhere. But it's to be honest with you, one of the reasons I like it is that being a man, I particularly like reading on the bathroom. So it's like the light's really good there. It's really comfy. I'm like, okay, this is a nice place to read the Bible.
Yeah.
So it's like any good habit. Sometimes you have to trick yourself into doing it. But, the Bible is one of those keystone habits that, in fact, to be honest with you, apart from getting enough sleep, getting enough nutrition, like making sure that you've got clean clothes, there's probably very little you could do that would help your life more than reading the Bible every day. I mean, that's like, you start doing that, and the thing is, I've actually saw it. I mean, about 3 years ago, I was talking to one of my sponsees. There was this Bible in a Year plan with Father Mike Schmitz. He was releasing a podcast every day. And I said, come on, Brother Claude, let's do it. We started, I crashed and burned 3rd week in January, and he kept going. And it changed the neuroplasticity of his brain.
Yeah.
Because you're learning how God thinks. The great thing is, it means, the other thing is, this is something Pastor Renato said yesterday. He said, when I read something in the Bible, he goes, I'm always knocked out by it. And I want to share it. And it's true, you have this natural instinct to share what you've just learned, because what you're getting is it's just too rich for you to have to keep for yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's an absolute superpower. It is a superpower. It basically connects you with the supernatural.
Yeah. No, I think that's 100%. I think for me, when you talk about reading the Bible versus YouTube, for me, I think the Bible is there about developing the relationship with Jesus directly. What I noticed with YouTube is it's sort of slightly, even whilst there's definitely merit in terms of taking different perspectives, there's a slight distortion by somebody else processing it. And actually, there's an intimacy between the Bible and the Bible. Jesus will speak to you through the Bible. And it's all about relationship with Jesus. And that actually, in the Old Testament, you learn the harshness of God as well.
Yeah.
And it's the same God as well. So you really begin to understand the fear of God.
Well, that also comes back in Revelation, which
yeah.
By the way, at the end of this call, remind me, there's something really funny I want to tell you about Revelation. Yeah. But and it's a reflection on life. That's life's hard.
Yeah. And actually, what is life as well? Because since time immemorial, people have tried to make up their own rules and gloriously failed. And I think, from a practical perspective, some of the things I've had experiences of this week was a discussion with a guy who's a non-Christian, good bloke in theory, and he doesn't like EDI.
Communism is a good idea in theory.
Yeah, he doesn't like EDI, but actually, what transpired in the conversation was that he was actually trying to rationalize certain situations, imposing his own ethics as if, and try to rationalize sort of, put square pegs in square holes. And it's just utterly absurd to try and sort out what is right or wrong, even in a sort of business context, without having a reference, because it's just a quite an absurd notion. I think and actually I was thinking probably what he was suggesting is actually worse than EDI, the tyranny, all of those sorts of elements. So I think as well, this whole thing around compassion is absolutely critical, and grace and forgiveness a really important tool. Otherwise, the alternative is to be overwhelmed with anger, and that's just a complete disaster. And it's quite subtle around that. And this deception, the subtlety of the demonic is is important to understand. And I think as well, there's you talk about wisdom, and it's about looking at things more broadly. And I think it's about trying to discern, whilst in a business context things may make sense financially, maybe in a short term, but actually, is it the right thing to do? So are these parasitic tech businesses really the right thing to do? Or actually, where's the heart, which is more of an internal thing? And I find myself revolting against things when other people don't. And I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but I've got a strong sense of ethics.
Maybe it's discernment.
Yeah, discernment. And I don't...
Because, sorry, before I forget, let me just say one thing, which is particularly germane to you. The other thing about reading the Bible every day and understanding the Bible is that you can see the patterns of human behavior. And what that does is that helps you grow in the prophetic. And that's your business. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's right. And I think the more difficult circumstances you become, and I do believe prophetic is a skill, it's ability to see around corners. And so I think absolutely. And I think, but we are flying really badly in the face. I mean, we've got things like ESG, WEF, the Davos things on at the moment, and the dialogue that's coming out of there is just bizarre. If you listen to it, I mean, there's two aspects. One is the psychological, and there's the other sort of right or wrong aspect. And it's really quite disturbing, and it's really quite, it's really very much technology driven, retaining power. It's the antithesis of what Christianity is all about. Yeah, absolutely. There was a great quote by the head of JP Morgan, and he said, this is a lot of people in a bubble repeating to other people the last thing the last person said to them. And I was like, it's like, good. No wonder your CEO is one of the smartest things I've heard anyone say in a very long time.
Yeah.
But, listen, you're right. But the thing is, people can see it. It's like the veil has been taken away.
Yeah.
Right. It's not hard to see the WEF for the sham that it is, even though it's still powerful. And we can see, I'm sure you've seen that Konstantin Kisin takedown of woke at the Oxford Union.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, there are a lot of people there are a lot of people mentioning, talking about the fact the emperor really does have no clothes. Yeah. Of course, the loyalists and the wokals, I mean, they're the party faithful. They've been brainwashed. But the thing, the sad thing is, it's like for you and me, it's for like all those people in that group that you used to have. It's like, if you don't have Christ, you have no defense against this stuff.
No. Yeah, it's really, well, I think
you're like that guy that you were talking to who's trying to make it up as he goes along. It's like, good luck with that.
Yeah. Well, I think the reality is, the more uncertain things get, the more things are put on the line. And I think we've had a very comfortable patch for quite some period of time. And I think, I've seen and I've witnessed, and it's only by grace and love that I've managed to cope with it, which are practical gifts from God, that, what happens to people when they run out of self-reliance ball? They just don't know who to turn to. And frankly, they just implode. And so if too many things happen to these wokals, they just do not have anywhere to turn to.
Well, hallelujah. Hope, and that's where revival comes along.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I mean, that is actually a potential fertile ground for revival in the church, because, you know, who do you turn to when you're out of options? That's one of the problems in the UK, right? It's like, you know, you never get, I'm trying not to swear these days, but I'll say it's like, you know, in the UK, you never get truly fucked. There's always somewhere you can turn. There's somewhere you can go to help. In South America, you don't have that.
No.
So you need God. So those people are far more likely to turn to God far quicker than we will do in this society. But it's you know, I just want to share this one thing that's been on my heart. It's like, I'm sure she won't, you know how much I love my coach, Alison.
Yeah.
And over the last, you know, couple of years, she's had some hard stuff that she's had to go through. Husband had cancer. She had a serious health condition. Wow. Dog died, you know, a bunch of things. But it's like, I don't know that she's, you know, she is absolutely, as probably one of the top 1,000 coaches on the planet. She's done she's, you know, she knows how to handle with life's, you know, life's adversity. But I don't think she's really reached out for a spiritual solution. I don't think she's used it to redefine her relationship with God.
No.
And it's crushed her spirit. I just, you know, I'm looking at her email, she's not the same person. And in actual fact, all that horrible stuff, which I think a lot of it actually was God trying to tap her on the shoulder, it could have made her stronger, it could have made her better, it could have made her more vibrant. And it's horrible. It's just, it's like, it's exactly what you said. It's like a beautiful, high-performing, you know, all those things, but it crushes you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from a practical perspective, on that note, I mean, I've in a company turnaround. Don't forget, I'm also out of my depth pool, right? So I'm often faced with problems where I can fix 20% of the problem, but not know what to do with the other 80%, literally, because you know but actually, by addressing and taking action and developing relationships and putting other people first, which is a version of love, you can start putting things back together practically. I think the alternative is for people like Alison, and I know lots of different types of Alisons. That I think they eat themselves up on the inside, and I can recall times in my life where I've run myself into the ground. But actually now, I mean, I think it's the metaphor I'd use. It's almost like people have got a picture of what utopia looks like, which is the house, the car, the horse, the dog, the wife, the kids, whatever it is. But actually, it isn't that at all. It's all about operating and appreciating nothing, and being comfortable with absolutely nothing, almost, and still trusting God. You know, when things get tough, and I think it really is. You know, and I think the other thing is, if you don't, you know, there's this curse of more, and Jesus said, you need to appreciate what you've got, and that's a gift from God. Without which you're on this hellish situation, which is driving a lot of behavior. So from a practical perspective, that's vital. Otherwise, frankly, you tend to trash everything. And I've found myself doing this with numerous sort of females in my early sort of rather successful womanizing when I was at university and other places. And you just sort of on this wheel of you know, trying to optimize everything to and use a huge trail of destruction behind you. And you know, and particularly if you're a sort of class A type person, I think if your expectations are high, if you're not focusing your energy in the right place, you either blow a fuse. Well, I tell you one thing I noticed actually in business as well. I noticed that people either they start lying, Paul, whether they're under extreme pressure, or they go mad. And I've seen both. And tragically, I've seen both. I've seen people break in really terrible situations. And the lies, which is the woke side of it, is an alternative. The only other alternative is God, where you actually say, look, you know, I trust you to sort this situation out. And let's face it, Paul, you and I have got to quite a good place at the moment.
Absolutely.
It's
you know, like we talked a few weeks ago. It's like the worse the world gets, the saner I feel, and that in itself is like a complete paradox, because
Yeah.
For most, even when I was doing working in advertising, I knew I was mentally ill. I mean,
Yeah.
trust me, I knew that. So the other thing is, look, what's really important about reading the Bible is it means that it's the only book you can read where you get a live commentary from the author. Okay. And funny as that sounds, that's nevertheless the truth. I stole that from Mark Driscoll. So you're getting direct divine downloads as you're reading it, right? Which is like, tell me something else that can even compare with that. Like nothing.
I know.
But the other thing is, and this is a big one, is that sin, it gives you an understanding of what sin is.
Yeah.
And how it affects your life, and how toxic it is, and why you want to move away from it. And if something's not going well in your life, look for sin and shut that door.
Yeah.
I told you a couple of weeks ago when St. Paul said, "Who will rid me of this body of death?" I told you that they used to be a practice in ancient Rome where they would take the murderer, they would take the victim of the murderer, and they would bind, that's how bad. And I was like, whoa, it's like, that's so powerful. It almost gave me PTSD thinking about it.
Yeah.
But that's how deadly and toxic and debilitating sin is. And I've been thinking about that for a couple of weeks, and I've been sharing it with quite a few people.
Yeah.
And everyone's agreed. It's like, it's like, we think it's just okay to go to a strip bar and get a cheeky blowjob. It's like, no.
Yeah.
It's like, that stuff will kill you.
Absolutely. No, I think, the other thing about the Bible is, it's important to read it with the right heart. I mean, for a start, as a non-Christian, it makes no sense at all, which is a bit of a tragedy. And without the Holy Spirit, it's a pretty bizarre book. But if, as a Christian,
can I just stop you? There's like a version of it that I bought for my trainer, The Word on Fire. It's just the Gospels. It's beautifully put together. There's this amazing art in it. It's just the full Gospels, and they've got a commentary from Bishop Barron. They've got a modern commentary. They've got a commentary from the Church Father. They've got, so there's a whole explainer thing that goes along with it.
Yeah.
So really now, honestly, it needn't be that impenetrable. Look at YouTube. You can get all those Bible Project 5-minute videos.
Yeah, I agree totally. But what I was going to go on to say, Paul, was that I think if you read it from the perspective of what can I read in here that suits me, it's quite easy to gloss over some of the more challenging stuff.
Yeah, that's the one attitude that won't work well.
And actually, for example, some of the more provocative stuff is around a woman's role and a man's role.
Well, I don't know, Tom, is it really that provocative? Because a woman's role, I was arguing with someone the other day, so it's women. I go, no. I said, what it says is to obey your husband. So I'm not saying obey all men. It's like obey your husband. Now, you may not necessarily agree with that, but that's probably because you've never been, you haven't been in a relationship with someone that you've really respected. If you as a woman really, really loved and respected your husband, you would obey him.
Yeah,
it would be a natural extension of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the challenge with that is, rather than sort of think, well, that doesn't suit me, because that's just one example, and there's lots of examples of similar lines in the Bible. Well, that doesn't suit me. What can I read in here that suits me and builds me up rather than challenges me? And because if you read, there are some lines in the Bible, for example, there's one line in the Bible which is about, 8 words, which says that Jesus holds all things together. Right, one line. And the physicists have discovered broadly that the particle that holds everything together is in the shape of a cross. And also the other interesting thing they discovered is that relationally, at atomic level, matter actually doesn't exist without the interrelationship, Paul. So Jesus is all about relationship, but actually matter doesn't exist. So a neutron and a proton actually don't exist without their relationship between each other. So the whole universe is about a complex series of relationships. And again, practically, I mean, one of the things that I, in terms of extreme sort of hubris versus humility, the Bible says, and I've been involved, as you know, with a company in the UAE setting up and developing a strategy for sustainability. And if you look at some of the projects, they're absolutely bonkers. Like taking CO2 out of the atmosphere is utterly insane. I won't bore you the reason why it's insane, but purely from a carbon dioxide perspective, you'll generate more carbon dioxide doing that than taking it out the atmosphere. It's just beyond bonkers. But the attempt to do that is absolutely absurd. And in fact, what the Bible says, which is actually very refreshing, makes a lot of sense, is that, look, Paul and Tom, it's your job to look after the planet in the best way you can, and not chuck your fag ends down or whatever else, not drive too much or whatever. And actually, Jesus will sort out the planet. And practically, I mentioned this to you that, yes, CO2 levels are going up, but actually, what the funny thing about CO2 is, one, the nature is very effective at taking CO2 out of the atmosphere. It's designed that way. But actually, what happens when CO2 levels go up is that certain types of plants start growing even more voraciously and absorbing more CO2. So if you look at the desert, it's actually being plants have never grown in the desert before are now growing in the desert because CO2 levels are rising, and that is not by chance, Paul.
The other thing is reading the Bible. It tells you what what you're really supposed to focus on, and it's like a lot of people are trying to focus. It's like one of the worst things about the social justice warriors is they're trying to fix the world while they're overweight with green hair.
Yeah.
It's like fix yourself first, do all things well and for the glory of God.
Yeah.
As a Christian, that's literally the mantra in recovery is do the next right thing, do the next right thing, do the next right thing. If you get those basic patterns of life right, life will, you will, it's like compound interest. You will naturally be okay. But it's just this, and the world has just become so daft, right? Just believing all this insane nonsense that men can be pregnant, or that sort of like Britain is systemically right. It's just such a fiction.
Yeah.
That it's like actually just sort of like just basic. If you live your life through basic biblical principles, you'll smash it.
Yeah,
right.
I think the problem with those sorts of lies, if you take the Scottish government situation, the very fact
what is going on? I can't even look at it, because every time I look at it, I go like, it just sounds like they've gone completely round the twist.
I know. Well, pretty much. Well, I think the problem is with it, Paul, is that it shouldn't even be given the light of day, because the problem is, from a process perspective, if I put my process engineering hat on, right, you stop doing stupid things and you just concentrate on the process. And actually, what you don't do, if you try and fix things that are wrong in the first place, you create a lot of rework. And it's endless rework, and it becomes more and more complex rather than actually get to the root of the problem and say, look, that's nonsense. We won't do that at all. And I think that, this giving air to this stuff is demonic, and it's really very disturbing. But it's almost impossible to resolve, because it then becomes an issue of the distorted dialogue, compassion versus whatever, and it just gets this life of its own. So from a practical perspective, it's just vital to know what's right or wrong, what to focus on, what not to. And Jesus said, focus on what is good, true, and honest. And yet, what does woke do? Exactly the opposite. It focuses on all the negative and all the nutty stuff. And what that does, of course, is proliferate all of that stuff rather than, gives life to it, as opposed to putting it where it deserves, where it deserves to be, in the bin. So it's exactly the opposite. And I think I've got something on my office wall somewhere which gives some very practical tips in terms of how to manage stress, and that's one of them. To bring things into the light, not to focus on negative things. It's bloody common sense, but it's it can very easily take
I mean, that's the thing with woke, is it focuses on, it's a resentment ideology that weaponizes envy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So yeah, it is completely demonic. Good. And and as we talked about earlier on, it's like, once you get to the Bible, then you feel you naturally want to share that, and that takes you into worship, and that takes you into churches, and that takes you into practices, It's like, I've been spent the whole week looking for lepers. I haven't found any because I need to drag them along on this Sunday.
Yeah.
And I was telling my trainer, I said, if I take 20 people to a healing service, are all 20 people going to get healed? It's like, it doesn't work like that. But some of them definitely will.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of them will. I mean, this
Well, it's
and
also
and,
also about God's. The other thing is as well, which is a tough sell, is that it's about God's timing. It's not about our own. Us imposing our will on God is rather absurd. So I think what we're doing is planting seeds and developing relationship. I think the critical thing I've noticed in 2023 is, and from a psychological perspective, I've noticed that in the turnaround situation or business broadly, people don't know what's driving them. And the analogy I've used is a puppet. What's pulling your strings? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it the WEF? Is it woke? What is pulling your strings? Versus actually what should be pulling your strings, and it's Jesus. And
it's also mimetic desire. Are you familiar with Giraud and all those models?
Yeah, you've mentioned
it's
that.
Like we have absolutely no natural defense other than Jesus to mimetic desire, none.
No,
it's like I will immediately start wanting, like if you and I we are really good friends, but if we weren't Christians and if we were living in living close together, right, and there was a whole group of us, it's like whoever the richest one was, whatever he was driving, like Jaguar, Mercedes, do you know what I mean? We'd all start wanting that. It's what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
And sorry, I'll let you go on. But the other thing is, one of the wisest things I've heard in a meeting was someone said, it was an AA meeting, said most people don't know why they do the things they do. And I'm like, bingo, hallelujah. It's so true.
Well, I've studied that. That's the winning thinking stuff. So I study that and I teach people in relation to psychology and dialogue and WEF and technology businesses to get to grips with what's actually driving them. So I've got some science behind that, which is the winning thinking program. But actually, the question is, Paul, broadly, what should be driving us? Now, if we don't know what's driving us to start off with, which most people don't psychologically, then actually what should be driving us, and actually how do you connect to that? And I think one of the nicest analogies actually is a marriage, and the way it should work is, you've got husband, wife, and God, and the kids actually sit below that structure. And if you leave that relationship to its natural, natural way, let's say, without God, or without the practice of husband and wife praying to God together, what you get when the husband falls out of favor, you get the wife siding with the children, and the husband pushed to one side, and that breaks up. And that's fueled by feminism and goodness knows what else that women are more prone to, and women are more prone to woke as well. So that division between the husband and the wife is the critical building block of society. And actually maintaining that triangular, when there's a problem, you don't necessarily sort it out yourself. You pray together to God.
Totally.
When you do that, it blows your mind, Paul. And I've done it with my wife, and it's just a wonderful thing to do. And that structure really matters. And that's actually a robust structure that holds water, without which, if you think you can practically hold a marriage together without that, you really are in dodgy territory, even as Christians.
Yeah, 100%.
So
absolutely 100%. I mean, Doug Wilson talks about atomic societies and molecular societies.
Yeah.
And if you have Christ, then you have those strong bonds, because you have a strong family, you have a strong churches, you have strong community, you have strong businesses, as opposed to the freedom and the atomized society where, you're free to sort of have sex with whoever or whatever you want. It's like, well, but you're just full of atoms, easily manipulated.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing is also on that note is it's been like some of the most remarkable things that happened. It's like when Jesus was on the cross and he was dying, and he said to Mary that John would look after her. he's re-establishing relationships, in a church sense. So whilst you've got family, Paul, and I've got family, and we've got a spiritual family around us as well, and Jesus will introduce us
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
to hold us and actually redefine this family around us, which is so important. And it's all
But we
about
also get, we also get reparented. I did not have a good relationship with my father.
no,
And now I really do feel, I can feel the effect of God being my father, like as God is my father, but also his influence through Pastor Renato, who's at least like 20 years younger than me. But it's like I said, do you know what I mean? But it's he's got spiritual authority over my life, and that's not just him. That's the influence of God working through him.
Yeah.
And through you and any number of people.
Yeah.
There's you can get that paternal love and guidance through a number of avenues. And it's and honestly, weirdly enough, you can also get the maternal aspect as well.
Yeah.
I remember finding that with Alison. I also found it with Pastor Kirley.
Yeah.
You can be reparented.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the bizarre reality as well, which is a huge responsibility, is that we are the living manifestation of Jesus on earth in our own individual ways. We are actually the mouthpiece for Jesus.
Or the devil.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's one or the other.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I'll tell you, but one of the things Jesus said to me, and I mentioned this to you, was that you are my son. And I just blew my mind. And then he said, I am with you. So, and that was at a time when I needed more accountability, Paul, but the responsibility that goes with that, which is just so vast and so incredible, and so graceful. So yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and I think the reason why I think a lot of this actually is about free speech as well, Paul, because I think my book, I was heavily criticized actually. One of the things, this woman who, in fact, she attacked me today, she said, if you look at the title of my book, The Evil of Silence, actually, and I thought long and hard about what to call my book, The Evil of Silence, but actually, unless you bring things out into the light and you have open communication, you've got productive relationships around you, then you have got a very evil situation which gives life to a lot of different things. So it's so important for us to listen to what people are saying with the right heart, and just bring. And Jesus said this: bring stuff into the light. And so free speech is just the most important thing in my view. Regardless of where you come from, just the ability to articulate stuff. And very often actually you can say nothing. The interesting thing about saying nothing, it's a very powerful thing to do, because what it does, and Jesus did this, it's like holding a mirror up in front of your face, Paul. If you say something utterly bizarre, and I've worked in some pretty ridiculous situations, and someone jumps out and says something completely ridiculous in ridiculous circumstances, the best thing often you can do to say nothing, because what that does is it forces that person to face what they've just said. And it's very easy to jump in. So there's a lot of very practical things you can do to try and create that realization in individuals, to hold them accountable with love for them rather than some sort of tyrannical view of what's right or wrong. Because actually it's the love of God that brings people to realize their sin, Paul. It's only the love of God.
Yeah.
It's nothing else. And actually we can show that to people. We can show that love to people. And they think, what the hell is it? What's different about Tom and Paul? It's about that. It's about grace and love, and that's Jesus is love. So, and love also is the single indestructible emotion as well. It's the only thing that endures. Anything else doesn't endure. So it's and it's a great place to be.
Well, the other thing is, as an attractor, the other thing is if you're a Bible, technically, if you're a half decent Bible reading, believing Christian, then what that should do in you is it should produce some humility. And humility really is the new black.
Yeah.
Humility is so attractive.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, you know, I had no idea how attractive it was. Like someone like, you know, I mean, two people that we both know who both have a tremendous amount of humility are Jordan Peterson and Jocko Willink.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're actually both very humble men.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they've got like cataclysmically successful personal brands.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they're leadership gurus par extraordinaire on a global level, but they're both very humble men.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why they're humble is because they've both in their own way had very difficult challenges they had to face. I mean, Jordan Peters has almost been crushed. You've had difficult challenges, and in fact, you know, James talks about this, that you don't find Jesus through an easy life. And I think that it's really when you run out of headroom that you've got the opportunity to turn to Jesus. So we really do have to thank God for these difficult times, because it is the opportunity for people to realize actually maybe their self-righteous strategy isn't working. And there is an alternative. And then they turn to the outside world, and hopefully they'll find some love. And so the difficulty is that the handle is actually on their side of the door to open that door. Jesus, I do believe, will break in, but from my experience, that doesn't happen too often.
Well, he's kind of like a gentleman. He doesn't go where he's not invited.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's not saying he's not omnipresent as well. So the whole thing is just the most wondrous thing. So just such an exciting journey as well. So, and it's also about the great lie, I think, is people get the Bible very wrong. It's about freedom. It's about, you know, Jesus wants us to be us. He doesn't want us to be a bunch of robots. He wants us to go out and make mistakes, knowing that he'll be there to pick us up. You know, the story is about burying treasure. The person who got the kicking was the person who buried their treasure, did nothing with it.
Yeah.
It's really so important that we go out in knowing that we've got the support and do the best we can and come back, live and learn, get a bit of a kicking, but we're not by ourselves. It's just a wonderful journey.
Yeah.
And I think the alternative is you just eat yourself up with some ideology that doesn't work, and it creates a self.
Yeah, you turn into Andrew Tate.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, either you have God or you are God.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, and that doesn't work either, because there's always someone.
Well, it might work for a while. It might work very well for a while, but ultimately.
Well, I think it's use an Andrew Tate analogy. I mean, part of his challenge, and I used to think a bit like this when I was a young man, that, you know, I could take anybody on, you know, but, you know.
Yeah, but, you know, maybe he's the Alexander the Great of the business world. You know, maybe he will for a while, but there's going to be some point where you know, he's got no one he can trust. He's got no one. It's only him. It's only Andrew Tate.
I know,
right?
To use the fighting analogy, which I think he relies on, because he was quite a good kickboxer. I think the difficulty with that is it's all very well being a good kickboxer until someone really gives you a kicking, right? And then you realise actually there's always someone bigger, Paul, that can do some real damage. And so this notion of self-reliance is nonsense at its simplest level.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, and that's a very sort of primitive example, but, you know, and I think we have these sorts of ideas in our heads which we justify to ourselves, we can do it ourselves. And actually most of education's about you can do it yourself, and you can define your gender, and you can do just endless bullshit until you get hit. Until Tyson.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's like, because what you're doing is all spiritual, all mental. It is spiritual sickness, but let's call it, you know, mental illness comes from avoiding reality.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And the more you avoid reality, because that's what denial is, the more accelerant you're pouring onto your problems.
Yeah, which is of course what the devil does, because it distorts. No, the devil is the deceiver, and that's the reason why this stuff is untruthful, and untruthfulness is the root of all evil. And if you can, and actually psychologically, one of the things that fixes people, even if dreadful situations, God forbid, happen to people, the best thing to do is to look at it in the cold light of day and to go to Gabor, whatever his name is, the psychologist. He's a wonderful chap, Matty. I can't remember what his name is.
Martin,
But he talks about, actually, and you were talking a bit about this earlier, about look at your demon face in the face and look at your puppet master, whatever that was. And just, he uses the word befriending it, right? In other words, rather than actually look at it straight in the face and say, look, I don't need you anymore. But actually not to disregard it. The difficulty is with this dialogue is that it normalizes and it brushes it under the carpet, and that's where this Scottish thing gets a life of its own. There's multiple layers of bullshit, which creates this self-fulfilling conflicts and the antithesis of what we're talking about, sort of self-righteous structure, Babylonian structure, which just gets knocked down. It's just paper thin, and in fact you can see this. I mean, look at the EU, all of them, they've again been caught out for corruption. Just bizarre. So it really doesn't work. But yeah, so we should be grateful for tough times. I just hope and pray that more people, turn to God. Otherwise, they're seriously in trouble.
Well, isn't it great that you and I have got the solution?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, the paradox, of course, is that no one wants it. Right? You go, you can change, you can change, you can change, you can change. It's like, I've been here for 4 months. I've managed to get one person to that church.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's okay. That doesn't matter. I'm into the action business, not the outcome business.
No, absolutely. Well, I can honestly say the same, probably, in terms of numbers. Maybe, I don't know, but you don't know what influence you're having, Paul. You don't know.
Yeah.
You just don't know. And I think, we can only do what we can do. But yeah, we are the lucky ones. So thank God. Anyway, I hope people are listening to this that find some encouragement and strength. And if they are struggling, that they, will find Jesus, frankly, and find a good church, speak to their Christian friends. And actually, I think the other interesting thing is, I'll tell you one story. It's actually about speaking. It's also about us sharing our testimony. So I'll give you an example of a turnaround. I was in Birmingham, very lonely. I was stuck up in Birmingham, one of those stressful situations you can imagine, because builders are really big buggers. And if you're turning around a construction business, I was frequently in a boardroom crammed full of builders, or big, straightforward talking people. And often I had 3 or 4 meetings with these guys, per day, not really knowing how they'd respond. And there was one situation with the finance director where I was one-to-one with her, and she really couldn't cope at all. And I said to her, look, from a financial perspective, these are the things we can do. So we sort out the cash flow or whatever we were going to do, and actually we'll give the rest to God. And I thought that's a really bizarre thing to say, in this environment, and it actually made me feel uncomfortable. But what it triggered was, she then said, well, it's funny you say that, because somebody else, one of my friends, who was just saying that triggers with that, and then the jigsaw fits together.
Yeah.
So whilst it sounds bizarre, it's so important, Paul, we share our testimonies and our prophetic, what's on our hearts.
Yeah.
Because if the stuff is right on the inside, then the stuff that comes out is going to be somewhere close to the target.
Yeah.
So I think it's important we find the courage to do that, and something I frankly struggle with, certainly in a business context. And I think it's also helpful as well. I find these calls encouraging because it helps us to build our strength in articulating and having these open, frank discussions to encourage each other to find that courage and that connection to do so.
Yeah. And that's exactly what Jesus told us to do. We're the body. We have to act like each other's immune system.
Yeah, absolutely. So fantastic, Paul. Brilliant to speak to you, my friend. And
all right, brother. Have a great weekend. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. Take care, man. See you later.
Bye.